Rory and Mal have lost their Black Magic Boy
That's Black Magic Boy.
as they have officially fired Julian from the new Rory and Mal podcast after a sudden departure from the last couple of episodes, with many fans of the podcast looking for answers on Instagram and Twitter, waiting for the return of their Lebanon Don, Julian, as his departure from the show was officially announced on episode 334, The Fighting Irish, literally 1 minute before the episode ended, where Rory addresses online questions and confirms Julian's departure.
Clearly, Julian is no longer with the podcast. We wish him the absolute best. Love to him. But yes, he's no longer part of the pod. Appreciate all the contributions. And I think that's it. We'll be back
In a
2,
couple
3,
days.
4 more times. Patreon.com/New Rory and Mal.
Uh-huh.
See my 2025 predictions that I smoked already out the gate.
You're off to a good start.
With Rory looking at Mal, who responds with simply nodding his head with no words to give, as one of the most vital members of his show is leaving abruptly to start 2025. And it's clear over time that Julian, alongside Damaris, play a huge part in completing an overall great podcast, especially with Julian, as he has great engagement and interaction with the fans outside of the shows, which is a lot more than what I can say OVO Mal has been bringing to his own show over the last couple of years, because in the case of being too cool to pod on his own podcast, we find out that Jamal Clay is not the real podfather like we all thought he was from the JBP. And in my humble opinion, Mal needs to look at the man in the mirror and make that change, like MJ. For constantly dismissing the viewpoints of the other members on his show, which include Damaris, formerly Julian, and primarily Rory, who is the real A-Mike or Beyonce of the group, who is in process of saving Destiny's Child again.
You might have to go straight to the airport.
I don't have no luggage.
I'm rolling.
But it's better for you to go home than not have luggage. It's not.
I have nothing against her, but we just felt like we can continue on as a trio, and that's what we're doing.
Clearly there is a big elephant in the room, and we're not talking Republican. Well, maybe, because we're talking about the Jason Whitlock of hip-hop podcasting here, with OVO Mal and his lack of desire to deliver great content weekly.
It's just a business decision. It's no bad blood. I just think that certain things ran its course. But it's all love from me. It's all love from Rory.
Oh my God! Wow! Oh my God!
I get so much trouble.
But what's clear is even if Julian left without the issues behind the scenes with Rory Mal and his work wife Baby D, Mal's narrow-minded viewpoints in hip-hop over the last year has left him constantly belittling his other co-stars on his show and essentially rebranding his entire platform in only 1 year, making the entire Rory and Mal podcast look like the official OVO hip-hop media platform without being signed under the sweatshop.
No. What the fuck are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Now, before I load my YouTube clip and get my shit off, you may or may not know I made a video 6 months ago that went viral going over how I feel Rory and Mal, but mainly OVO Mal, has lost hip-hop credibility in hip-hop media for the takes he had about Kendrick Lamar early on in the battle last year against hip-hop's biggest entertainer and sweetest pastry, Drizzle Pie. But again, not because Mal supported Drizzle Cake, but for the disrespectful comments made about Kendrick Lamar directly coming from OVO Mal on his own platform, while claiming to remain neutral throughout the entire battle, when clearly OVO Mal chose a side early on to roll with his OVO Peter Pan Graham, which makes sense in hindsight as Mal likes to play no face like Drizzle Cake to his fan base. And as the battle continued on, Mal's biased takes for his 69 God Drizzle Pie grew with more glaze and became worse over time, which clearly affected the podcast for the long run, as Rory has been trying to remain neutral to save the integrity of the podcast and protect the brand, which also includes Damaris and Julian, who try to create a balance of logic and emotions with Jay-Z's nephew, Mal, throughout the entire year of 2024, and his narrow-minded viewpoints of the battle between Kendrick Lamar and Drizzle Marie.
That's really just what it boils down to.
But clearly in 2025, with TDE rapper Ray Vaughn coming for OVO Mal's head top for being the official OVO sponsor in hip-hop media.
Shoulda did 60 days in for a podcast. I treat Mal like orders from Temu. He'll get boxed bad when it seem like everyone hate us. How can we not crash?
Nothing will ever be the same for the new Rory and Mal podcast in the hip-hop game. And for Julian, as a producer of the show, who is responsible to make sure the pod does its best with script writing for the episodes, including highlighting the main stars who run the show, I'm sure Julian grew frustrated with his efforts of promoting Rory and Mal by delivering great content for the episodes to even having his own comedic voice and being a huge part of each episode weekly. I'm sure Julian never expected to see all his hard work as a podcaster and producer for the Rory and Mal podcast go down this way with a simple send-off 1 minute before an episode ends, feeling unappreciated like Cherish, especially feeling unappreciated from Mal. Who always took Julian's love for granted. After the departure of Eden and Julian, it's only a matter of time before people will question Baby D's tenure with the group, as she has already had tension with Mal due to his very narrow-minded prehistoric man cave ideas of women in the workplace.
Plenty of women ain't turning down 1.5. You just sat here and said
like you
they got a
wouldn't turn
job.
down 1.5. You be putting that shit on women a lot. When we had that same conversation when you tried to convince me that I would fuck LeBron because he would pay me. Not everybody values the same things that you value.
A lot of women ain't turning down 1.5
A lot of women will. A lot of women won't, but a lot of women will.
Turning down 1.5 is not crazy. That's crazy for a woman to turn.
Where eventually Baby D will just leave Rory and Mal to have their own podcast by themselves, which in all honesty, Rory and Mal need Damaris to rebuild their podcast in 2025, especially if they don't find the missing piece to replace what used to be Jujubee on the Rory and Mal podcast. Here is why Rory and Mal will miss Julian as a podcaster and producer for their show in 2025. Dedication to the brand. Everyone on the podcast plays a pretty strong role representing the Rory and Mal brand, but not to the level like Julian does outside of Rory, where you really feel that Julian loves the podcast and wants to see its evolution as a podcast in hip-hop media, where he's very active on social media pages, promoting the podcast, including Instagram, Twitter, more specifically their Patreon account, with Julian being very tuned in with the fans of the show, especially with listening to the voicemails weekly that are played on the end of each episode, making all the fans, including myself, laugh our asses off. Essentially, Julian is like Parks of the Joe Budden podcast, but to the Rory and Mal podcast, where he does so much work behind the scenes as a producer, while still playing a vital part in maintaining conversations with funny dialogue as a podcaster on the episodes when Mal doesn't want to talk or interact with the members of the podcast after 10 minutes of talking in the beginning of the show. Julian really holds the glue together, in my humble opinion, with the episodes and behind the scenes for the production, which is very similar to another co-host that used to be on the show with Eden, before of course, he punched Julian for being an asshole. Even Eden himself has admitted that Julian is a vital part to the success of the new Rory and Mal podcast.
Who is the best answer right now, you, Julian, or Damaris? Don't give me a political
Julian's
answer.
killing it right now. He's fucking, I'm going to say, where's my camera? He's fucking annoying, and he knows that. He knows he's annoying, but I got to give him his flowers.
Really?
Even he could agree that Julian is much needed for the show's improvement over the years. Not to say that Baby D can't carry the same weight like Julian has with the show. I don't feel like Baby D can create that healthy type of balance without the help of Julian, who is able to not take things offensive or sensitive when it comes to what Mal says, Rory, or even Damaris says to Julian, where Julian just gets that dirt off his shoulder like he's a part of Rock Nation and continues on with the show.
That boy told you, kid, that turn up your shoulder.
Truly showing that Julian is that type of person that you want as a podcaster and producer for a show that is continuing to grow in the hip-hop media space. The extra work that Julian provides on the Patreon account for Rory and Mal, their social media pages, including Julian's own personal social media pages where he promotes the podcast, similar to how Rory does, is the type of engagement with fans that will be heavily missed, where I don't think Rory and Mal see that Julian holds a lot of value when it comes to the podcast and its marketing. Even if you replace Julian with another great producer or marketer to his ability, I don't think you'll ever find a person like Julian who really loved the Rory and Mal podcast, where he really wanted to see that brand go to the next level. Damaris loves Rory. She likes Mal, but does she really want to see the evolution of the podcast go in the way that Julian did? When Damaris has made it very clear that she gets fatigued being a hot girl and a podcaster. And hey, I get it. Mental health is important, but clearly Julian puts the show over his own mental health, especially after the whole debacle with Eden and having no HR. to really come in between and maybe resolve an issue between Jujubee and Kiwi, which again, I think Rory is incredible, but you can't do it all by yourself. And you especially can't create that magic of a great producer who showcases the Rory and Mal platform in the way that Julian does. My final thoughts. I think it's time for Rory and Mal to do a major rebrand for their show. Keep Baby D as a producer, but remove her one mic as a podcaster so she can have one beat and one stage.
One person front, my face on the front page, pure like a cup of virgin.
And have her own podcast that is ran under a network by Rory and Mal. Rory and Mal easily have a lane in interviewing hip-hop artists that are coming up in the genre, with their past interviews with hip-hop artist Shelly, formerly known as Drum, Quentin Miller, and Shmino. The difficulty with Rory and Mal is having a third or fourth podcaster on their show moving forward that will eventually frustrate Mal months after they're on the show, which will frustrate Rory with a lack of engagement on the show and the fans that ultimately watch and make the show what it is. And currently with Damaris as a podcaster, I personally feel she's one of the best podcasters, especially for females in hip-hop media. And like the Joe Budden Network has tried to do in multiple scenarios with multiple women having their own shows on his network, I really think Rory and Mal are missing a big opportunity with promoting Baby D having her own podcast. Even if there's not a big budget for it, if there's a way that they can have Damaris have her own podcast, which allows an opportunity for Rory and Mal to get back to basics and really have a formula where they can do a show on their own. They've already proven that they can do it with the great hip-hop interviews that they have over the last couple of years, or continue as a trio with Baby D, but allow her to have a larger voice on the platform where she's not feeling overspoken by OVO Mal anytime he doesn't like a take from Damaris that doesn't align with his or Drizzle Cake. And I hope Rory can get it together like 702 and ask OVO Mal, does he really want to stay or does he really want to go? Because Rory needs to know. Despite my criticisms of Rory and Mal and how they handle their podcast moving forward, they are still my favorite podcasters, and I look forward to what they have coming up ahead in the new year. Even if Mal glazes for Drake and I glaze for Kendrick Lamar, I will still always have love and respect for those two, as they've been a big part of my life since 2016. Thanks to Damaris and Eden over the years for allowing a new era for Rory and Mal on their own show and creating a great podcast with them. Even with Eden being gone, your presence was never forgotten, and more specifically to Black Magic's boy, Julian, thank you for an amazing 3 to 4 incredible years on the new Rory and Mal podcast. Even if Rory and Mal tried to whack out your legacy, your virtual mural on the show's impact can never be whacked out of history.
Yesterday somebody whacked out my mural.
Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what your thoughts about Rory and Mal moving on from Julian in 2025. And before I go, I'm sending my thoughts, love, and prayers to anybody who's affected by the fires in Los Angeles. I'm from San Diego myself. I feel the impact close to home. I hope that you're sending your love and thoughts tonight with anybody who's affected. But rest assured that the city of LA is the home of champions, but also the home of some of the strongest people in this country. My prayers go out to all of you in LA. Until next time, go be amazing and have an amazing rest of your day.